G'day and welcome to the first training report for 2022. I'm not quite sure how many of these we're going to be allowed to attend. It was about, I reckon, 250 to 300 supporters roughly here this morning. Not a great turnout. It was billed as a fully ticketed affair. Had to get tickets online but rocked up and you could pretty much walk straight through without even presenting the ticket. So that was interesting in itself. Boys have just finished training, a pretty taxing, I reckon two and a half hour session. Started at 9:30. A lot of them are still out here at the moment. A few of the boys are running laps or just jogging laps, a bit of a cool down. What I might do is what I usually do, just start with the rehab group. The blokes who didn't sort of join in the main group. And there were quite a few of those, but there were a couple of no-shows, or three in particular that I noticed weren't here at all. No Tom De Koning, which was interesting, and no Jacob Wiedering. Definitely didn't see those two boys at all. And obviously Liam Stocker, who is recovering at the moment from that syndesmosis injury. He might have been behind closed doors, but I didn't see him on the ground, although us supporters were all pushed up at this legend stand into the ground. It was hard to get, unless you had binoculars, which I didn't have. It was actually hard to get a good view of the rehab group who were doing sort of standing skill stuff right down in front of the change rooms down there. But I didn't see Liam Stocker. In regards to the rehab group, obviously Doherty did know his skills, but ran very, very strongly and looked super fit. And it's great to see Sam Doherty back at the football club and training really well, albeit just the running. David Cunningham and Caleb Marchbank, who continue to recover from ACL injuries, which pretty much occurred at the same time last year. Cunningham ran very impressively in what I did see and did some skill work off by himself with one of the assistant coaches. Marchbank probably less in regards to the running, so maybe a little bit further behind than David Cunningham in that regards. It's the first time I've ever seen, since I've been coming to these training sessions, and it's been 2 years since I've been to the last one, but the first time I've ever seen Ed Curnow in the rehab group. Now, he was running really strongly. He did a fair bit of running, but did not join in any of the skill work. The same with Jack Nunes. Luke Parks was an interesting one. Put on a fair bit of size, Luke Parks. Looks pretty fit, but only did sort of low level running and a little bit of skill work. And young Dominic Akew, or Akai, I think is how you pronounce it, the Category B rookie. He just did some standing skills. Setterfield, a little bit of both, running, a little bit of skills. He seems to be okay. He put a fair bit of weight on, which looks good in regards to his physical size, Will Setterfield. Josh Honey started in the match sim and then ended up just running some laps and doing some skills by himself. Paddy Dow, the same. Didn't notice him until late in the session, and he was definitely part of the rehab group in that regard. It was really hard to get an indication of who was here and who wasn't, to be perfectly honest. I reckon I counted about 10 train-on players, blokes I just didn't even recognise. And some players, there was two number 15s out there. There was a guy wearing a number 13 who I thought was Liam Stocker because it was a similar size, but it definitely wasn't Liam Stocker. There was a guy that looked like Nick Graham. In fact, I thought it was Nick Graham. Definitely Josh Cripps was out there. He's a train-on player. Jesse Glass-McCasker was definitely out there as a train-on player. And a number of others as well. So they definitely, for this training session, beefed it up with about 10, I don't want to call them ring-ins, because one of these, I suppose, young players is going to fight for that last spot on the list. And if I'm a betting man, just looking at the makeup of our group, I reckon Jesse Glass-McCasker might just have his nose out in front, because you would hate for anything to happen to, say, a Jacob Wiedering, who wasn't here today, because just looking at our back half without Liam Jones, I reckon we might be pretty much exposed down there if we did get another injury to one of our big tall backs. It was good to see actually Tom McDonald looking pretty fit. He was out there as a key defender. But I would say Jesse Glass-McCasker is the one I'd be looking at to take that last spot. As far as the emphasis on the work which the main group did, and they did train very hard. It was a taxing session. There was a real emphasis for me on repeat efforts, and you've got to be really careful of these training sessions. I've been down here in the past under Bolton and then under David Teague, where the enthusiasm was just absolutely incredible, and you walk away really excited. But to me, it wasn't so much a flatness about this session, but it was almost like a real structure in regards to that. There was a real plan. It wasn't over the top. There was a real focus, as I mentioned, on those repeat efforts, working hard, an emphasis on containing the ball and trying to hit up the 45 in the match sim work, which I'll get to in the middle. Look, you take it with a grain of salt this time of year in regards to the skill level, because the intensity and pressure is probably not there as much as it would be in a game situation. But it's definitely, for me, an area that will continue to be a little bit of a concern, is those foot skills. I saw a number of turnovers, whether that be by just poor skills or whether that would be by poor decision making. So let's just go to the match sim, because that's probably the most I got out of it in regards to what we might see moving into 2022. There were two teams. There was a green team playing the blue team, and I reckon it was about 2 10-minute quarters. And look, the usual suspects were in the midfield. The likes of, I think it was, Chera was up against Walsh at a certain stage. Kennedy was up against George Hewitt. And just while I'm there with the new guys, I thought the four who stood out for me in the session, obviously I was taking quite an interest in the new guys, but the four new guys look super fit. And really fitted in well. George Hewitt, he's got really, really good skills on both sides of the body and looks super fit. The same with Chera. I like the look of young Lewis Young at defence. He's still raw. I think he'll play round one against the Tigers, but I think there's going to be times where Lewis Young is going to frustrate us just because of his age. But I thought he acquitted himself really well against Harry Mackay. A willingness to defend really hard in regards to spoil, but then he's got a really good nous of floating off his man and taking an intercept mark. And the other boy was young Motlop, the kid we took in last year's national draft. He's a fair bit off the pace at the moment. He obviously will need to work on his fitness. He did the whole session, which was great to see. He's lively, he tackles hard, he's got massive quads. Absolutely massive quads for someone so young. And that forward stock in regards to the small forwards is really growing. So the positive for me was the new guys at training. And I'll throw in young Murkoff there as well. Young ruckman, big beanpole of a kid, ex-volleyballer. He was up against Pitnet in the match sin early on. I thought he acquitted himself quite well, but he's another one we'll need to spend a fair bit of time in the VFL. So as I mentioned, it was blue team up against green team. The blue team, Carroll was really good in the match sim. Kennedy, Pitnet, Walsh, Fogarty, Cottrell and Setters were the mids. The forwards, a combination of Charlie, Silvani up forward, Fisher. Sam Philp was an interesting one as that pressure forward, and he laid a magnificent tackle. I think it may have been on Nick Newman, which caused a turnover. And Owies and defenders, I mentioned Oscar McDonald back in the fray. Spent a bit of time on Harry. Sard, Williams as those high half-backers, and a Gov, Mitch McGovern. It's been touted by Michael Voss that he will spend some time down back. And we saw a little bit of that today in the match sim, but it was hard to get an indication of exactly what that's going to look like moving forward. But given the fact that we are now missing Liam Jones, it's probably a fair bet to see Mitch McGovern starting down back at the start of the season. But he, as we know, he could be a really valuable swingman moving forward. The green team, Cripps, Murkoff, O'Brien, Chera and Hewitt on the ball. O'Brien and Cottrell going head-to-head on a wing was interesting, both running machines, obviously. I thought Cottrell was actually okay. Up forward, Harry, Honey, who was in and out, started in the match sim and ended up just doing a little bit of running by himself. Martin looks super fit, playing that sort of half-forward role. And young Durden as well looks really fit. And down back, I mentioned Lewis Young. Brody Kemp took a couple of nice intercept grabs. Got lost on a couple of occasions, Brody Kemp. And I reckon, I've got a feeling that it's going to be a bit of a fight between Brody Kemp and Lockie Plowman as that sort of third tall. So we'll wait to see how that pans out. I really liked Jordan Boyd as that small lockdown defender. Laid a couple of really crunching tackles. We remember Jordan Boyd came from the Footscray VFL last year, picked it up in last year's mid-season draft, had a knee injury with Murkoff. And I thought he acquitted himself quite well down back. And Tom Williamson always looks super fit at this time of year. He spent a bit of time down back as well. That's just about a wrap, guys. Nothing special to report on. Assistant coaches all engaged. They were all out there. I got a feeling though that Jacob Wiedering and Tom De Conning possibly might be in isolation, considering that both boys were not there at all, which was quite unusual. That's a wrap. I'll try and get back to training later on in the week, and I'll speak to you soon.